And what it starts with is, so this isn't one of the official questions, this is more of a category. What I want you to think about when it comes to your success last semester, and then we'll think about in a second how that's gonna play forward into this semester. What I want you to think about is two things that ideally would really be closely related, which is the degree to which you're learning and the degree to which you're satisfied with your grade. In an ideal world, there would be no difference between those things. If you are learning a bunch, you get a good grade. If you're not learning a bunch, you wouldn't get a good grade, and that would be something that nobody would think about as being different. In reality, sometimes there's a split. Sometimes you learn a bunch but don't get a good grade, or you don't learn a bunch and manage to get credit. And so what I want to make sure is that you all understand that in this class, to the best degree possible, we're going to tie those two things together. So your success in this class is going to be determined by how you approach it. So the questions that I want you to answer right now on your little sheet of paper are, number one, did you spend your class time thinking about biology, thinking about the concepts that we were discussing? Those of you who were in my class last semester, I know, right? Because I was here and I saw it. And those of you who were in Mr. Barron's class, you be honest with yourself. I mean, I'm not going to grade you on what you're turning in today, so you can not be honest, but it's going to be to your advantage to be as honest as possible. When I say thinking about biology and the concepts we were discussing, what I mean is, were you actively thinking about biology during the time that you had? So a lot of times people are like, okay, well, I have this piece of paper and I have this pencil and I'm writing stuff to answer the questions on the assignment. But if what you're talking about is, the Super Bowl, and if what you're thinking about is the talent show, then you're not really thinking about the concepts that we're learning. I'm not asking, did you do the work? I'm not asking, did you get the answers right? I'm asking, were you thinking about what was going on? So last class, we had some great conversations yesterday during class. One of the things that was really cool for me was I was talking to people and I was asking them questions like, what did you see? And a whole bunch of people who did really great work, they drew some really neat things. They were looking, and this is great, this is way better than I could do in terms of our work. I asked them, what did you see? And they said, I don't know. They didn't know. They weren't thinking about what they were looking at. All of those slides that we looked at had words written on them. Some of those words were words that you're familiar with, and some of them weren't. And then in one of the classes, I think it was this one, somebody tried to decipher the handwriting. Who was that? That was you. Yeah, that was a neat one, right? And we figured out it's called WaterNet is the common name. The scientific name, I don't even remember. I'd never heard of this thing before. But I looked it up after class. And what I discovered is that it's a type of algae. It's a colonial algae. And here's the cool thing about that. I looked it up. You can too. You can look stuff up, and you should. Because when you look at something and you don't know what it is, if you are thinking about biology and the concepts that we're doing in class, then you'll be thinking about things like, what the heck is this thing that I'm looking at, right? So it's an algae. Is that a plant or an animal? It's a plant, right? No, it's not. So it's not a plant. What does that make it? It's not an animal either. As it turns out, and we did talk about this way back in the dim mists of first semester, not everything is either a plant or an animal. We tend to think about it like that because we're animals, and most of the stuff that we see, we think of as either plants because they don't move around or animals because they do. But it turns out that isn't the case. There are other kinds of organisms as well. Fungi are not plants. They're not animals either. They're fungi. Bacteria, archaea. And there's a whole group of organisms that kind of don't fit together, nor do they fit with anything else. That group is called the protists. Algae is a protist. It's a photosynthetic protist, So it has some similarities to plants, but they're not plants, and that is cool. And what I want to encourage you to do is find the cool stuff, no matter what we do in this class. There's gonna be something that you don't know, that you think you know, but you're wrong about, or that you know a little bit about and you could find more about. And when you find the spot where what you're thinking about is interesting to you, that's when you're learning. That's when you're learning. If you're thinking about something boring because you already know it, you're not learning anything. If you're thinking about something and it makes no sense to you, it's boring. You're not learning anything. When you find that sweet spot, that stuff that you are thinking about and you're like, whoa, that's really kind of cool. Everybody here understood what I just said, right? Like there's more than two categories, plants and animals, and there's also fungi, bacteria, archaea, and then this like bunch of things that nobody really can, but we just put them all together and call them protists. And that's pretty neat. That's nifty stuff. Okay, next question for you. Did you use at least 90% of your class time productively? That includes days that you skipped. Okay, so if you are sick, if you can't be at school, nobody expects you to use that time productively. But if you just don't come to class, then that's a waste. You've wasted that particular day or that part of the day that you weren't in here. So if you were here when you could be, and while you were here, you were thinking about biology about 90% of the time, then you get a yes. Here's one that we don't typically ask you in school. Were you interested in what we're doing? If you're not, I am okay with that. I'm not going to judge you for not being interested. It may be that you simply aren't going to be interested in what we do on a daily basis or every once in a while, and that's okay. But here's the thing, I want you to be interested. So if you're not, just say no, and then let's see if we can like figure out a way to pull you in, because this should be really cool stuff.
I'm not interested in certain things.
That's, you get to decide. Yeah, that's a reasonable question. What if sometimes you were and sometimes you weren't? Like, you know, sometimes. You could write sometimes, sure. And then the last piece, be positive and curious. So while you were here, were you thinking to yourself, okay, what's going on? What are we doing? How are we doing it? What are we learning about? How are we figuring stuff out? And were you doing that in a way that it made other people feel like doing the same thing? You're in here, and the people around you are thinking about biology because of what you're saying and doing, then you're being positive. If you're not, then like, you're not. If you are finding that, when I walk over here, they start talking about other things. When I walk over here, people start complaining. It could be you. So think about that, because we have that effect on other people. Okay, that's one category, learning. Ideally, your grade and your learning would go together. We all know that that doesn't always play out exactly the way that it needs to. So I want to know about your grade too. I want to know, did you pass the class? Okay, so that's a yes or a no. A D is a pass. If you took the class pass, go pass. A P counts. An F or an N means you did not earn credit. The second question, or question 6, so the second of this set has to do with your target grade. And grades are not super important to me personally. I feel like they're actually really bad for you and really bad in a whole bunch of ways. I would do away with it and come up with a completely different way of giving you feedback and providing other people evaluations of you as a student. But this is what we've got, which means some of you are like, I gotta get a B, or I have to get at least a C, or some of you, for whatever reason, you gotta get an A. So you answer that question. Did you get that grade that you personally wanted? And the next piece here is about what other people want. In particular, the people who kind of run the show at home. Parents, guardians, uncles, grandparents, whoever it is that you go home and like looks at your report card. And if you don't have somebody, that's fine. Ideally, everyone would have somebody who cares about their progress in school, but I understand it's not universal. But in general, most of you are gonna have households where this is a thing. People wanna know how you're doing at school. Sometimes you're okay with a C, they wanna see you get a B. So were they happy with the grade that you got, or will they be when they see your report card? Okay, and then the last piece, this really only applies to students who were in my class, or let me rephrase that. I can only really clarify this for students who were in my class. I don't know exactly what things look like in Mr. Barron's class. I know that he has high standards. I know that he asks you guys to work and learn, but I don't know exactly what it looks like. So I'll tell you what my expectations were, and then you can evaluate yourself relative to that. So, did you meet our expectations for learning and engagement? Think about the stuff we just talked about. Were you using your class time to think about biology? Were you present and productive at least 90% of the time? Were you positive? Like, to what degree did you buy in to what was going on? Okay, and in Mr. Barron's classroom, there might have been different expectations. In many, many classrooms, the primary expectation is about work. You're gonna be working. Or, more commonly, it's about getting your work done. In here, that's really not the big push. I don't want you to think that you're done when you get your work done. Come on in, have a seat anywhere again. I don't want you to think, oh, I'm done, now I don't have to do anything. What I want you to do is I want you to come in here and I want you to approach this class the way that you approach the things that you do outside of school that are the most fun for you. So if you like gymnastics, I want you to come into this class and think about, like, well, what would I do in a gymnastics class? Would I be like, okay, I'm gonna do my 3 tumbles and then I'm gonna like play on my phone? No, like, you want more. And that's what I want in here. If you like some other sport, baseball, softball, football, whatever, if you're interested in reading, if you like to play video games, if you skateboard, if you like to play board games, if you like to draw, if you like to sing, all of those things are things that if you have the opportunity to do them, you don't think about it as a task to be completed so you can move on to something else. If you love singing, you can sing, you just sing until somebody tells you to stop. And that's really what I'd like in here. What I'd love for you to come in here and be like, okay, well, there's all sorts of cool stuff we can do. I'm just gonna do it. So those 8 questions, make sure your name is on the sheet, get you caught up, and just hang on to it for a second, okay? And here's what I want you to now think about moving forward. So this was last semester, your learning and engagement, your grade, like how did that all play out for you? Here's how you can interpret the work that you just did. First of all, if you answered yes to all of these things, you might not need to change anything at all. There's one little thing that I'm gonna ask you to do that maybe is different, but some of you probably already do it. If your answer to any of those questions was no, then I wanna talk to you. You're gonna give me these pieces of paper, so I will track you down. I will track you down and talk to you, or you can come and talk to me whenever you're comfortable. Those of you in Mr. Barron's class who don't know me yet, I'm not gonna I'll give you some time to adjust. But ultimately, if you have any no's, I wanna talk to you, because it's really important for me that everybody get as close to 8 yeses as we can possibly get close to. The one thing that I wanna encourage everybody to do, no matter how successful you were last semester, Georgia, hush. I want you to ask yourself 2 things. One is, why? In terms of biology. So as we're looking at, looking through the microscope today, there's all sorts of really cool questions you can ask, like, why is it that when you're looking on a slide, only parts of it are in focus at the same time? What does that tell you about what you're looking at? It's actually a really important thing biologically. It tells us something really important about the biology of the things that we're gonna be looking at on these slides. I want you to be asking yourself questions like, I mentioned that water net is a colonial algae. What that means is that the individual cells group together. And so what we see when we look at that water net organism is a big clump. It's a visible thing made up of multiple cells. We also are a big clump of cells. We are not colonial. We're multicellular. Water net is colonial. Here's something that's interesting. What's the difference? Why is it that when I talk about this algae, I'm telling you that's colonial, but when I talk about people, that's multicellular. Both have many cells hooked together. What's the difference between multicellularity and being colonial? And it turns out there's an answer to that. There's gonna be an answer to everything. I may not know it, Mr. Fiskin might not know it, we might not even be able to find it in books or on the internet, but every question we ask, there is an answer. And what I want you to be doing is asking yourself the questions that will lead us to interesting answers. The other piece is when it comes to the things that you do in here, not the things that we ask you to do, but the things that you do just on your own. I want you to ask yourself why you're doing it. And if the answer to that question is because it's gonna help me and others learn, then keep doing it. And if the answer to that question is, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, I cleaned up a pen on the table the other day, and there was ink all over the place. And I guarantee you that whoever was doing that either did not ask themselves why at all, or when they did ask themselves why, the answer was to make somebody's life a little bit more difficult. Think about that, because that won't work, as you could probably guess in here, if your why involves making things worse for other people. It's gonna be a bit of a hard road for you, okay? And then the last thing, and this is kind of a big deal, and it sounds kind of harsh, but actually it's super straightforward. If you didn't pass this class last semester, whether you were in my section or Mr. Barron's section, then you need to do something different. If you are not willing and able to do something different, then I'm gonna have you removed from the classroom. It's gonna be maybe a couple weeks. And it's not because I don't like you, and it's not because I don't wanna work with you, but because I have no interest in you wasting your own time. If I gave you a piece of paper and told you to dig a hole in the football field, most of you would be like, why? That's not gonna work. And if I told you, I promise you, it will work. You went out there and you tried for a few minutes and realized that you can't stick a piece of paper through AstroTurf, you would be like, not doing this anymore. This is a waste of my time. You would do something different. Certainly wouldn't do that. If you did not pass the class first semester, it's because you were doing something that wasn't working. If you're not willing to change that, then you've got to be somewhere else, because it won't work, right? You will not earn credit, you won't learn anything, you will waste a bunch of your own time. So this is gonna be something that I know what your grades were. If you were in my class, I put them in, and if you were in Mr. Barron's class, I checked them yesterday. So I know what your grades were last semester. Every single person in here can earn a passing grade in biology. Every single person. All you have to do is show up, use your class time well, have a reasonably good attitude, and turn stuff in. That's it. Everybody can do that. No Fs. But if you're not willing to do those things, then you won't pass. And let's get you somewhere else where you have a better shot, okay?